Another roster crunch for the Bucks, created by the return of Thanasis Antetokounmpo. Where do they go from here? Camille and I examine next on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. My name is Justin Garcia. I'm joined as always by Camille Davis. We thank you for making this your first listen of the day each and every day. You can find Camille weekly on the Locked On NBA show and the Technical Foul podcast as well. And you can hear me on the Bucks radio network throughout the course of the season. Today's episode brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. We said at the top, Thanasis Antetokounmpo, something we were waiting months for, speculated. Everyone speculated and wondering, and Frank talked about it too. You kind of earmarked that last spot for Thanasis. The longer things went on, I wouldn't say we forgot about it, but the more I think you started to kind of put it out of mind and just assume, okay, I guess it's not happening. And the words that we heard from Thanasis about, I'd also like to kind of carve out my own path and show it's not just Giannis that has led me here. I think we all kind of assume, I guess that's the case. Not so fast. On the eve of Labor Day, we get the news that Giannis Thanasis has signed a 1-year deal, fully guaranteed, with the Bucks. So where would you like to go from here, Camille? The roster crunch, the journey of Thanasis, some of the meetings that we saw taking place during EuroBasket. There's a lot of little branches to this tree.
Yeah, let's start with just the fact that the Bucks gave him a guaranteed contract. And what does that exactly mean for the rest of the roster? Because to your point, like, we generally were like, Thanasis will probably be back with the Bucks. And then you heard all the other news. It's like, well, maybe not. Shout out to Frank, though, because Frank stood 10 toes down the entire time, even called that it would happen Labor Day weekend. He was like 2 days too early in his prediction, but said Labor Day weekend, the Thanasis sign is going to hit and we're going to be fine. And indeed it did, to the point where even Sham Charania said, Thanasis is signed. So Giannis is at least in Milwaukee to start the season. And so
we'll get to that in a second.
It's okay. I'll hold off then if we're going to get to that in a second. But I mean,
well, let's do it.
Rip the Band-Aid off, because come on now, like, it's all right to take an L every so often. Sometimes you miss information. Sometimes things don't work out the way that you thought that they were, and it's okay to be like, you know what, he's actually going to be in Milwaukee for this. Like, just leave it alone, Shams. Like, just leave it be.
I mean, the qualifiers that continue to be added to the Giannis reporting is the most tiresome part of all of it. I mean, we all talked about it. I know I've talked about it with you and a few other guests over the summer as well. I don't think Sham Charania is just pulling this out of thin air and making anything up. I also don't think it's coming from Giannis specifically. I'll go as far as to say I'll stop just short of the doorstep of saying I know it's not coming from Giannis. So I think a lot of the information is coming from sources with motives in this, and this is the type of wording you see when that happens. But yeah, I mean, we could have stopped before the last sentence.
We could have
on that tweet. You didn't need to go, so Giannis will at least start the season with Milwaukee. I mean, if Thanasis is there all year, Giannis is there all year. There are ways around it, although this is past the deadline where Thanasis could be traded. It's because he's a free agent that it extends into. But look, if something happens where, I don't even want to put it out there, but something happens where it's just not the start the Bucks hope for, and then it's, well, maybe we should consider these things. There would be 2 players involved in the deal, but that starts to get complicated. So yeah, we don't need to, well, at least for the start of the season. Like, we already know this is going to be unavoidable next summer, and it's just another one of the, like, well, dodged it this summer, and it's going to be an annual tradition now, kind of like the Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers retirement watch. The season ends and you know what you're in store for.
Yeah, and I mean, unfortunately, that's part of having a superstar. Like when you have a player that other teams value, there's always going to be a lot of noise around, hey, is this the summer when we can finally get him on our team instead of watching him on your team for the upcoming season? So, like, I know part of it is the game, but man, it feels at times like the coverage that Giannis gets during like these moments is so different from other superstars where it feels at times like it's guided, like people really want him out of the city for one reason or another. So seeing the Thanasis signing, bringing that back around, and the last part of the Shams comment tweet, because it even came through as like an ESPN alert on the phone with like he's at least staying at the beginning of this year, where it's like I roll my eyes at it a bit, and it's kind of like at this point, like let's get back to hoops. Like let's just actually get back to playing basketball. But I think the Giannis thing, like you said, next summer it's gonna come up again. It might be louder next summer for all we know. But right now, what we do know, Giannis under contract. We saw when EuroBasket kicked off a couple days ago. At this point, my whole frame of time is warped with the holiday now. But you saw Doc there, you saw Darvin Ham there, you saw Hort, like you saw people there at the game, not clearly not just for Giannis, because the Thanasis is also a Buck now too. So like we deal with this season, but now we also do know, like we mentioned, the Thanasis is on the roster, a guaranteed contract. The Bucks now have 17 guys on the roster, two of them with the contracts that aren't necessarily fully guaranteed, with Andre Jackson Jr. and Amir Coffey. So like the Thanasis coming in and getting a guaranteed spot immediately, something that made me kind of go like, okay, so now what do we do?
So that's the interesting part here is 17 players under contract, only 15 of them are fully guaranteed. So, I mean, we could stop there and say, well, there's your 15 guys. I don't necessarily think it's going to be that cut and dry. We, about a week or so, 2 weeks ago, however long ago it was in the offseason, talked about that 15 spot when Amir Coffey came in, and it was down to the what happens with Amir Coffey? Is it Amir Coffey versus Ajax? Is somebody else in here? Frank has thrown out his suggestions for the final few spots on the roster. I mean, I this would be the least likely scenario, but I don't think you could rule out a multiplayer trade either if there was something else they were really looking to do or even wanted to keep some flexibility. You would, of course, have to find somebody with value, and there's a name we've mentioned before, and attach somebody with a little less value to that. But there's a lots of avenues to go here for this team now to round out the roster, but it will have Thanasis. It will have Giannis on it as well, at least for the start of the season. One quick thing before we get into that 15th and 14th and 15th, potentially a roster discussion here. Giannis in the EuroBasket game, if you are listening to this in the morning, is not playing today. I think it's Bosnia and Herzegovina that Greece is playing. Knee discomfort. Do you make anything of that?
From one game, it's hard for me to. Now, if this carries to another game, I think at that point I'll start kind of being like, okay, wait, what's going on? But we do know that
Giannis, I know you love
has,
Greece. Maybe let's shut it down.
Like, listen, we also know Giannis is dealing with chronic knee problem. Like, that's just something that he's going to have to manage throughout the rest of his career. So my hope is that him sitting out today was just kind of like that management of his knee, not necessarily something happened to it, but we'll see for the next game. How about you? Are you a little nervous seeing that he was out?
Same thing of, because it's the second EuroBasket game he's missed. And yeah, we'll see. And if this becomes a let's watch it here, then I at least have the eyebrow raised. You still got a month before training camp starts, and we're 5 weeks away from the first preseason game as well. So a little bit of time, but we're starting to get into that crunch time right now. So what happens with the 15 players that the Bucks are going to round out here going into the start of preseason in the regular season, more importantly? We'll dig into that coming up after this on today's Locked On Bucks. Time to talk to you about our friends over at Monarch Money. Today's show sponsor. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's your 401ks, properties, investments. When you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. It does the heavy lifting for you, where you can link all of your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Identify some of that missing 401k or other investments you've put off there. Maybe you've switched jobs and forgot about finances you got out there. Monarch can help you track that down and get that investment allocation all in one spot. You can maximize your investments with ease. You can also manage your money with ease, single or with a partner. Increase your savings rate, easily review finances with that partner or a financial advisor, and keep a clear view of your financial health week to week and long term. Don't let this financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKEDONNBA. Okay, so you got to lock two guys off the roster. Let's just make this very blunt. Who are the two that are left without a chair in musical chairs?
Yeah, it's one of those things where you can point, like, just looking at the roster and saying the two dudes who aren't guaranteed, they're going to be gone. Andre Jackson Jr. and Amir Coffey. But when I look at the roster a little bit closer, it's like, does that make the most sense if it's at least those two going, right? Because when I look at the roster and I think about, like, where are the Bucks a little bit weak at? I've said it throughout the summer, like the wing depth, and not because they don't have the bodies to play there, because of course you can run out that 3-guard combo that was fantastic throughout the end of last season, and in the lineup that I would love to see start for the Bucks, with Gary Trent Jr., Kevin Porter Jr., and AJ Green. You can use those two as your 1, 2, and 3 in whatever order you so choose there. Kevin Porter Jr. is probably the point guard there, though, but the 2, 3 can be flipped between Trent and Green. So you can roll that out there for sure. But again, you're looking at a bunch of guys that are 6'4", 6'5" right there. So to have a little bit more size on the wing is ideal, just again to have the option. Like, I know people can point to, well, you have Taurean Prince, you have Kyle Kuzma, but those are two guys who last season weren't playable in the playoffs against the Pacers. So, like, I would like some more options. So then you do look at someone like an Andre Jackson Jr. and Amir Coffey. And honestly, even Thanasis at this point of, like, that's a wing player on your team. So it's like, which combination of those guys might give you the best, the best bang for your buck going forward? And if that is the case, where else on the roster can you take away from? And the only other people I can look at on the roster so far and be like, well, maybe it's actually you, is Tyler Smith, which is a bit unfortunate because he is just a young player still trying to find his way in the NBA. We saw the Bucks trade AJ Johnson last year during his rookie year, and he was somebody who we heard Doc Rivers speak very highly of, loved the kid, thought the development for him would be really important. And that was the whole goal of drafting Johnson and Smith last year, which was development, trying to start working on developing players because of how the CBA is, just trying to get those bodies in there, putting more of an emphasis on it. And I wouldn't be surprised if this season they're kind of like, okay, Smith, actually, this isn't going to work. We're going to go in this direction instead, which would be unfortunate that that draft class would be out the door that quickly if it did go that way.
Yeah. So the tricky part is, and you kind of touched on it, the biggest need is on the wing, for bigger wings specifically, and the two non-guaranteed roster spots are wing players. I mean, Andre Jackson, I think everybody's still kind of, he can be a point guard or he 2-guard. He's a small forward. He's Ben Simmons, right? He's Ben Simmons light. And then Amir Coffey too, who in hindsight, a name that you had thrown out there, a lot of Bucks fans said, hey, I'd love to bring in Amir Coffey, and they bring him in on a training camp deal, and it was a celebratory mood. Unless Amir Coffey has a disastrous preseason in camp, I'm not saying he won't make the roster, but I don't think it's as simple to your point of sorry, buddy, it was never a guaranteed deal and we're full. I am curious what other stones you're looking under here and what John Horst could be eyeing. I mentioned too, if you would look at a trade and people would say, well, just trade this player, trade this player. As we've, discussed all throughout the offseason, there's not a market in trade for Andre Jackson Jr. There's not a market for Chris Livingston to be acquired via trade. Your point on AJ Johnson is a valid one, but I don't think he being Tyler Smith is viewed the same as AJ Johnson. And maybe that has to do with having a really bad summer league. Maybe it was the lack of progression we saw a year ago. Maybe it's the fact that from the moment we saw AJ Johnson, you could see, okay, it's not to say this kid is a star, but there's something there that I can see. We'll see how much of that develops. It just hasn't been the case with Tyler Smith. So there aren't really trade candidates on this roster unless you attach a good asset to it. So you clear out 2 spots and bring in 1 player, or maybe you clear out 2 and you bring in draft picks or something else and cash, which you can do as a non-apron team. And look, I just want to be clear. I am not advocating for this player to be traded. But we mentioned it before. And the fact that he is one of the few players on your roster that is young and has that type of value and is now all of a sudden at a position that is crowded. There is not a dearth of 2 guards on this roster. He is up for an extension. We heard John Horst saying, it's one of our priorities. And I was in touch with his agent day 1 of free agency. And yet here we sit on September 2nd, and there has been no mention or talk of an extension for AJ Green. I don't think it will happen, but we kind of earmarked this and said, let's just keep an eye on this. The longer this drags out without the extension for AJ. I mean, it's one thing to say we gotta make 1 roster spot. You now have to make 2. And I don't think you sign Amir Coffey that late into free agency to, albeit, a non-guaranteed deal and a camp deal, to just say, well, sorry, Thanasis became available, see you later, and just throw the baby out with the bathwater. So I do think they're looking at every single avenue they can to retain Amir Coffey and get this roster to 15. So it's things like that you have to just keep an eye on. I don't think it happens. I don't want AJ Green traded, but that's the one guy that has value that you could combine another diminished asset with and get something back for.
I think I'm going to be a little bit nervous about AJ Green until I see like the Bucks and him figure out what that extension looks like if you get to that point, for all the reasons that you laid out there. Like, he is a positive asset. And if you're looking to make a trade to bring something good in, you generally got to send something good out. And AJ Green checks those boxes because he provides a premium skill set in a league that prioritizes shooting and spacing, and he can do that really well. He's a bit better defensively than most would assume. So he holds up good on that side of the ball too. He's not somebody who you can necessarily play off the floor. And that's really, really valuable, especially as the NBA continues to evolve and we're moving to this weak link theory and all of that stuff along with it. So that's a candidate, and one that I hope does not leave the Bucks roster. Now, again, I'm not saying AJ Green is untradeable in my eyes or anything like that. It all, of course, depends on what the package would be if that did get to that point. But he is a player that, he's 25, 26, somewhere in that range now. So maybe a little bit older than people might assume just because of when he kind of started to pop in his NBA career, but still a young player that can provide you great value with a premium skill set. One of my friends always says like the Sam Merrill trade for Grayson Allen is one that he's always like, we should never have let Merrill go. Like, I get it, but he was a young shooter under contract. So and you see what he's doing now with Cleveland. And I would probably feel the way that my friend does about AJ Green in most of those situations. Like, dang, I wish we didn't have to let him go. But he's somebody who, like I said, I'm a little nervous still until I see that extension put together about what happens with AJ Green.
Yeah. Nervous is I don't know if I'm even nervous. It's just I have this on the radar of let's see what happens here, because we heard all the right things surrounding an extension for AJ Green. And granted, we're not going to hear negotiations are taking place. We're not going to hear what's going on. So there may be something that drops tomorrow, right? Or later today or later this week. And these talks have been ongoing and we're just not privy to that. But it's been quite a bit of time now that this is kind of dragged out. So that's the part that just makes you feel like, okay, let's see what happens here with the space that the Bucks are going to have to create to bring in Thanasis Antetokounmpo, and then what else happens from there. The last thing too is some of the other names I think everybody would just point to and say they'd probably say it behind my back, but Chris Livingston, let's get rid of him. Just waive Chris Livingston or waive this player. I think the three of us, you, me, and Frank, talked about this at one point. I don't think you waive Chris Livingston after you just released him, signed him, release him again like this is a fantasy league here. So I think he's protected in that sense. Same with guys like Gary Harris. You don't sign him, first week of free agency, and then sorry, buddy, we're just going to take the cap hit. We're going to eat the money and waive you. So yeah, it's going to have to be those two names if somebody's being waived. Tyler Smith is the dark horse. I know Frank has really been pounding that drum. You haven't seen nearly enough growth, that's for sure, but it's still a very young player to give up on at this point. So yeah, I think at this point you would have to say it is unfortunately those two players that are on non-guaranteed deals, or there's some type of trade that is in the works and the Bucks are exploring to maybe keep one of those guys or even both of those guys potentially on the roster. One other thing to point out about the Thanasis Antetokounmpo signing, you briefly brought it up in our first segment. We'll get to that and take a look at the rest of this week as we move closer and closer to training camp. Coming up next on Locked On Bucks. Well, Locked On Bucks listeners and all Locked On listeners for that matter, we need your help. We have an important request. Locked On wants to hear from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcasts even better. It's your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't like, and answer some questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcasts.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes the survey, you get entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that is lockedonpodcasts.com/survey. You can also find the link in today's show notes. Thanks again for helping us out. And speaking of surveys, Camille, we did our own little Locked On Bucks specific survey and compiled quite a few responses on that. So I don't know if it's this week, next week, but sometime in the very near future here, we're going to run through those results. Some very surprising and almost unanimous responses that we got on some of those questions. So we'll get into that as we move closer and closer to the season beginning. What is it, 5 weeks from yesterday? It's 4 weeks. 5 weeks from yesterday is the first preseason game. 4 weeks from yesterday is media.
Early October. Yeah.
We're the local media, except for Eric Name, who was the only one that was out there in Vegas for Summer League. We'll get a chance to communicate with Miles Turner. So that'll be our first look at him. And you think about all the names that have been available at media day through the years. There was no in-person media day when the Bucks traded for Drew Holiday because that was the summer, fall, winter of COVID. But Damian Lillard, I remember being there and just kind of waiting with a few other colleagues and people that I work with on the broadcast, standing right by the door, waiting for things to get started. And all of a sudden, in walks Damian Lillard and just like walks in right next to me, stands directly in front of me, and think, there he is. Here's the guy that we made this whole big deal about, and just taking that photo and posting that and how much that blew up of like Damian Lillard is finally in Milwaukee. And now we can add Miles Turner to that list. So we'll get that in a month. September 29th is when media day hits. But to kind of go full circle and go back to what we started with, the signing of Thanasis, in hindsight, the reporting too, well, it wasn't even reporting. It was just kind of offhand mentions of, hey, Doc Rivers is here. John Horst is here. Darvin Ham is here. I don't think it was for Giannis. I mean, it was, we're here to support you. But I believe Thanasis himself even said that the Bucks were very pleased with what they saw in EuroBasket. So you get the sense it was, all right, we think we're going to do this, but it's kind of like the inspection before you pull the trigger on buying the home of, all right, he's still Thanasis. Let's do it.
Yeah. Because, I mean, to be fair, he is coming off of an Achilles injury himself. We know it's a very big injury to try to recover from. So the question of, what does Thanasis look like now post Achilles injury? And is this a type of player that, we can see being like a possible end of bench type of guy for this team? Now, again, that goes into why I never had qualms with the Bucks signing Thanasis, even though he did not play much. End of bench guys generally don't. So to have one on the end of the bench who is a really high character type of guy, not only for the superstar on your team, but when the whole roster is like, no, he's a consistent personality. And anyone who's ever worked a job with somebody whose personality can seem to flip every time you come into the office or walk into work, you can understand the type of stress that can bring on you. To have a consistent personality type that's always encouraging doing those things like Thanasis does, it's really beneficial, super beneficial to have, especially as the end of a bench guy. So yeah, I can see the Bucks brass just being like, we just got to make sure, like, he's coming off an Achilles injury. Like, let's see what he can do on the court at this point. And Thanasis has looked like Thanasis, very high energy, kind of an annoying player at times too. I saw in the game today, he was all in someone's face playing defense. They swung their elbows. I don't really think he got hit by that elbow, but he made it look like he got hit by that elbow, and it was a grease ball the other way. Like, those are the types of things you get from Thanasis, and he's looking, from the limited play I've seen in EuroBasket so far, like the Thanasis that we saw in limited playing time in the NBA as well. So, hey, I'm here for it. I've said it before. I'm here for Thanasis being on a team if it keeps our superstar happy, content, for sure, and he brings a lot of value to the team as a whole. So that trip out there to see Greece from the Bucks brass we mentioned, I think you're right about it not just being about Giannis.
Yeah, and Frank mentioned this before too, that Thanasis with Andre Jackson Jr., we've already got Andre Jackson Jr. here. It's Thanasis, and there's a lot of comps, especially with their energy. I mean, I would say Ajax is a better individual defender, but Thanasis brings you a lot of the same things. And while nobody is trying to say Thanasis is just a hair short of his brother in terms of offense, how should I word this? I trust the offense of Thanasis more than Ajax, where I at least know he knows what he's trying to do. Whereas with Andre Jackson Jr., to choose your own adventure a lot of times.
Yeah, that's actually a very difficult question to try to parse for me, of thinking about the offensive games of both players and like, well, which way do you lean with that? Like, for Ajax, has been the case of being pleasantly surprised at like the 3-point shot. Again, the volume is not high, but he has knocked those down at a clip that I didn't expect from him based off of all of the scouting reports of him and his game. So like, that's been positive for sure. But as you mentioned, the choose your own adventure, the decision making at times can be a lot. And for Thanasis, sometimes for him, the high energy, right, can lead to overzealous mistakes at times because the energy is so high. Like, sometimes on defense, it's like a lot of hands, a lot of movement, a lot of energy there, and it can lead to fouls. So it's, I don't want to say wash in my opinion for the offense, but I think I actually might lean a little bit Andre Jackson Jr. a little tiny bit, but again, that's a very close conversation to have, in my opinion, outside decision making. I guess Thanasis does have the decision making a bit better, but yeah, that's one I did not expect to kind of think over here.
Yeah, I mean, small sample size aside, you would take the shooting of Ajax over
Yeah.
Thanasis, but I think I would take everything else, Thanasis, on the offensive side, outside of that catch and shoot from
Yeah.
above the break in the corner from Ajax. But nonetheless, we know Thanasis will be on the roster. We know Giannis will be on the roster to start the season after a summer of exploring options, which we've said our piece on
Yep.
all of it. The wording, the start of the season, exploring his options. We got Giannis and Thanasis reunited, not only in EuroBasket, but now for the Bucks this upcoming season. And I dare say, Camille, we talked about what the ovation is going to be like for some players when they return. I think Pat Connaughton will get a lot of cheers. I think Brook Lopez will get a lot of cheers. I don't think we'll see it this year because I would assume he's still rehabbing. But next year, when Damian Lillard returns, I would assume he'll get a lot. But do you think Thanasis gets a stronger ovation than Miles Turner his first time on the floor?
Ooh. Honestly, yes. I do. I
I
mean,
do too.
Even when Thanasis wasn't on the team last year and he was just in the building at games, he still got a reaction from fans. He was still hyping fans. Like everybody knows in Milwaukee, everyone knows who Thanasis is. So to see him come back out there, we know he's going to be hype and his energy kind of bounces off the audience and they bounce it back. So like, I definitely think that the reaction initially of just seeing Thanasis back in the Bucks jersey could be quite the ovation from Bucks faithful. Although Miles Turner is the player that most Bucks fans are like, we need Miles Turner to really produce.
We need Miles Turner, and then a certain segment too, like we told you for years, go sign Miles Turner, and now they do it. But I do want to see some Thanasis items showing up on the game day giveaways this year for the Bucks. Let's just really lean into it this season. Okay, so we've got the survey results, the Locked On Bucks specific survey that Camille and I put out there that we are going to dig into. We'll probably turn on the bat signal and see if Frank has any thoughts aside from what he posted on Twitter about the Thanasis signing. And it's just about that time to start to preview the division, check in with our other Locked On cohorts in the Central Division for the Pacers. And see, Tony and I talked about the signing, but his thoughts on what to expect from Indiana. Detroit's a team the Bucks have been comped to quite a bit this season. The expectations for Cleveland, what's going to happen with the Bulls, and then the overall Eastern Conference outlook. We've got our over-under plus or minus draft to run through again, which did you win that last year?
Sure did. Didn't know what I was doing and won it all.
I believe I came in last. So we got that to run through, and then some other season projections that we're getting into here in the next 4 weeks. But it is September, and with that, it is the month that training camp begins. And before you know it, the season is finally here. That will do it for today's show. For Camille, I'm Justin. We'll talk with you guys once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.